You're good.
What is it picking up then if we have it on?
Your microphone hits this microphone and it doubles up, so
Okay.
it's a feedback.
No, I mean, so if we're doing the recording with this device and it's doing the camera like this, do we need to have Zoom up and running?
You should, I mean, or it's good because then when you talk, the camera will see it, but also as a speaker, it will show you as a speaker, so your voice will also be seen. So, or you, each one of you will be seen through your camera. So it just helps us not just.
Okay, because when I was seeing the YouTube video, I assumed it would show the screen of the speaker, but it doesn't.
I haven't actually, I didn't really watch the YouTube video. I just made sure it ran and then I was there, I don't even watch it.
It doesn't, so I was just wondering what, but it's.
But at least it shows it. It was,
Yeah.
I mean, it was good video. So,
I mean, was it clear and reasonable?
So it seems like we need to turn the volume up or speak louder.
So I can probably apply.
I thought it was pretty good for our first step.
Yeah. Well, it is 5:02. I will call to order the February 16th work session of the Amity City Council. Mike, I know you had a list of things to talk about tonight.
I always have things to talk about.
I don't have a list as well, but I bet that a lot of them are the same. Do you want to start us off?
Yes, ma'am, I can. I just figure out what I'm missing. So the first item I have deals with a code enforcement issue for fences, walls, hedges, etc. at an address on Nursery Street. There's it came to our attention through a community member complaint that there is a fence that blocks the individual's ability to see when they're backing out, and it does violate our code. The issue there is that I have a letter that I can show you that basically, it's a letter that basically states our code enforcement policy for fence out of limits. The issue being that the enforcement gives me the option, or the city the option, to turn off the water. And so my question, my question basically is, if I go down this path and I send this letter out tomorrow, you can see I postdated it for tomorrow, and it goes in the mail, and this person, these individuals come back and tell the city, make us change our fence out, or screw you, we're not going to do this. Is the city willing to go through with the threat of turning off the water as a possible penalty? If you don't, I mean, that's fine. I won't set that. There's, I think, also the options of giving them fines at a set percentage per day as set by council. And you guys can set that or something, but I just want to know how far you'd be willing to go with this potential threat if it gets to that point. Because if you're not willing to enforce it, then I don't really want to waste the time to go through with it, considering that's kind of a drastic action.
My first thought is I would rather instate fines than shut off someone's water. But there's always, so have Mike send the letter, it outlines all the possibilities. See how they respond. Does it give a certain amount of time before it needs to be remedied?
I believe it's 2 weeks, or
Okay,
2 weeks or 30 days. It's one of those.
We could always do $25 a day up until 30 days, and then your water gets shut off. You know, at the end of that 2-week period,
That's when you start imposing the fine.
then you make contact again with this specific, this is what we plan to do.
I say that we don't start imposing that $25 though until after that period of time. You have to. give
Whatever,
them
the
time.
2 weeks or the
Right.
30 days, whatever it
Right.
says, yeah.
Yeah.
But once that time has passed, then re-engage with the individual, say at this point, we're starting our the process.
I can do that. I guess my other question for council just says for guidance. Mayor King brought this up, so I hope I'm not stealing your thunder. If this is something you want to continue to have as a threat, and put teeth behind it, or if this is something you don't like the idea of even threatening to turn off somebody's water, so maybe I should craft or draft something to present to council to basically change the penalties and enforcement of that. I don't know if that's something you'd like to do. It's kind of, how did you explain it yesterday, ma'am? I don't quite, did I cover that pretty well?
Yeah, pretty much, like, because me personally, my first feeling is I don't want that to be the threat, because I feel like water is a need, and I don't want to hold that above people's head. And so if all of our enforcement start off with that, we're gonna shut off your water or one of these other, maybe we should have that even as a last resort, written in as a very last resort with other things forefront, and this is the process we take.
Agreed. Agreed.
Okay.
And this is a property issue, so I hate to jump to a utility from a property issue.
But I mean, like worst case scenario.
Right.
You'd probably rather have your water shut off than a leak on your property.
Exactly.
Or
Yes, yeah.
So from how I read this, it's that fence is 10 feet back from the curb line.
It is, but since it's a side yard and it butts another property, it's still too tall. So they need to take it down to 4 feet.
So they could cut it down.
They can cut it down or they can move it back, one of the two.
Is it a wood fence?
Yes, it is. And it's been there for quite, and that's the other issue. It's been there for quite some time. So it's obviously it was erroneously put in and no one ever bothered with it. Or at some point, one of my predecessors or your predecessors went, it's good. And which is one of the reasons why I think they're going to come back and say, we're not changing it or make us or something. Or they may say, hey, we didn't know, our bad. I honestly don't know. I just wanted to know how far you wanted to carry through with the threat.
So what is the
Sorry.
Comes up from asking, I was just gonna ask if there's any other way of removing or partial removing of the fence in order to get it back in the code.
They could,
Just cut down
Skill
that
saw.
section.
yes,
Yeah.
skill saw it down to 4 feet.
Because it's just that section right in the sight line that it has to come down.
Yes, ma'am. So it has to be
The front and.
Yeah.
to
everything
keep
in
it
front,
correct.
basically everything that adjusts further than the front of the house needs to come down to 4 feet.
Right.
Uh,
So it's something that they could do easily enough.
If they wanted to, yes, they could do it.
I would say 2 weeks would be a very short turnaround for that. If it's someone who, A, can't do it themselves and has to hire someone, 2 weeks is probably not gonna happen
I agree.
in the construction field. And it's not as easy as maybe just still sawing it, depending on what the braces are. It probably is above 4 feet, so that section of fence will have to be rebuilt completely. You might be able to use some of the boards.
Okay, if it's a wood fence with the 4x4 posts, they
Right.
might need to be completely replaced.
Right.
The issue with the timeline is I think it's written into the code.
So you could, I can talk to Bill Monahan, but just off the top of my head, we could work something out with them that if they show good faith effort to, they got a contractor, they got a date when somebody's going to come out there, they propose a counter alternative or option, we can extend the deadline if you so choose, but
Well, so if that went out, does it indeed say 2 weeks? Because if that goes out tomorrow, you could ask them to, let us know their intentions by the council meeting.
I could redraft the letter, obviously, to put that in there, it's just,
Yeah.
that's not a problem, I could put that in there if you, have this long to do that.
I think it might take
Yeah.
more than 2 weeks to get the funds.
Y'all, my background, y'all can do it down a 2x4. On the screen. Well, right down. And just at the bottom, take the white off. And cut them down to 4 foot, put them back up.
They could do that, they could do that, I mean, honestly, it's up,
Give the option, all you have to do is bring, and then, like you said, the corner of the house, out to the end, 4 foot. You don't have to really get into,
Can I read what that one does?
Yeah, there's not even a timeline in the letter.
the easiest way is just take the boards off and cut the bottom off and, put them back up.
there's a possibility, I mean, in all intents and purposes, how they solve their problem is their issue, not ours. They just have to get themselves back in the code. I thought in the front page and not near the highlight, there was something that said the timeline. If not, I can go back and determine what the timeline is and write it in there. I thought it was either 2 weeks or 30 days. I can ask that question.
We, with the weather way it's flooding, I have heard 2 weeks is a, especially a person working all the time, they only have the weekends to work on it.
We have an audience member.
They could, I hope we do 30 days, just because the way that it's in the, we're in the middle of winter right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say 2 weeks to respond, 30 days before you.
Who's responsibility?
And
I'll, before I send the letter out, I will confirm the dates and timelines. I'll let all council know that, and I'll send it out. I'll also add the addition that basically says if you act in good faith by this time, we'll allow you the option to keep doing it. But if we don't hear back by a certain date, then we'll have to start taking some action or something.
Yeah.
I'll figure that out, word it appropriately, and then send it back.
Actions as outlined in, right?
Yes. I will say that the citizen who brought this to our attention, I reached out to them a couple days ago. And they said, oh, I'm so glad somebody responded to me because I was about ready to go to, become much more vocal. I don't know what that meant. And so I told this person it's going to take some time for us to go through this process. And she was a woman, so she said, yeah, thank you. I at least appreciate the city's considering doing something about this. She had thought we had blown her off because she hadn't heard anything from us.
Provisions of the ordinance subject to civil penalties as set by resolution of the council for each offense. Is that resolution already set?
I'll check on that too. I think it might be. I'll ask.
Is that enough for you to move forward with sending out a letter tomorrow?
It might be tomorrow, the next day, but yes, I can do it from, I can go forward from there. By the way, since we do have an actual member of the community here, you want to give citizen comments,
Yes.
if he has any.
You have citizen comments to share with us?
Oh, boy, do I. I got two. I want to first start by saying, I'm going to bring up something that you guys talked about in the last council meeting, which is the ordinance in regards to weight restrictions in town. And I want to know if your guys' intent is to post on every street on that ordinance needs to have a sign. Otherwise, in my opinion, good luck enforcing it. Because if you don't do your part as a city to notify the motoring public, people who may not be from here, that there's a restriction on that particular street that they may decide to go on. I don't think that'll hold up in court. If you look at every other state highway that has a restriction on it of any kind, it's signed on both ends of it. And I would also encourage the city to look into the possibility of every commercial vehicle in the state that buys a permit that is, allows them to operate at over 80,000, receives a special permit from the state. That permit has sections in it for every single county in the state. And so it would be incumbent of the city to get your rate restriction streets listed in the Yamhill County portion of that permit, because currently the city of Amity doesn't even exist in the Yamhill County's permit. So the statement that that has been in place since 2017, I believe, is when that ordinance was enacted. Technically, it may have been enacted here locally only, but no one else in the world knows it
Yeah, that's what's
exists.
hold up.
So that's good information that we didn't have. I was here yesterday and I heard Mike give Gary guidance that I think the plan is to post on every intersection at both ends of those on the list. It's a lot of signs, but that's what's necessary to be able to let people know.
Yep.
Is that,
Yes, ma'am,
Is that-
that's the point. It may take us a little bit of time to get there, but we're working on it.
Awesome.
And we've also, for your information, sir, we've, Woodland, the one over here by the bridge, will go from a 5 to 10 foot weight limit.
if it's not on the list? Okay. You have something else, Ryan?
In regards to adding that street to the list, I'm a little disappointed with you guys. And here's why. You have no physical proof that states that that needs to have a weight restriction. So it is something that you guys as council did with no expert testimony. With all due respect, Gary, your public works director, is not qualified to make this. And with all due respect, Mike is not qualified to make those decisions. When I was on council, the only people who were qualified to make those decisions was after a study was completed. And that is a study where somebody comes out and actually goes a hole through the street, puts a sensor on there, and it measures the density of both the asphalt and what is underneath the asphalt. When we talked about this at an earlier company, that is cost prohibitive. Hence the reason why the only street that currently, that I can remember, has one on it, is the street that was actually completed over here by Rice Lane that actually has signs that say no through truck traffic. The reason it has those signs is because that study was completed during the rehabilitation process of that street. So I'm disappointed that council didn't seek more information before making a decision out of the air. Because it seemed like a good idea at the time, or just because it's had a sign. As far as I know, based on information that Mike has told me prior, when I was a council member here, there's no reason to justify the 5-ton weight limit to begin with. So if you can't justify a 5-ton weight limit, I don't understand how you can justify a 10-ton weight limit.
So to your knowledge, the whole other list that's marked as a 10-ton limit, no other except for Jellison has had that study.
As far as I know, no. And how that ordinance came about and items were added to that list, my assumption would be, was at the whim of people on council at that time. Or public works directors or staff. But as far as I know, and as far as information that Mike has looked into prior when this came up, there is no street survey studies that have been completed, which actually measure the density of what the street is made up of as asphalt and what it is made up of as base, which gives you the information you need to make those decisions. And at the time, I will remember we briefly had a conversation about it, I believe with engineering, and it was like $10,000 a block. Something along that line is what was thrown out, and that's why it was cost prohibitive. Because just to do Woodland Way would be like $40,000. Just to get information on a block, two blocks.
Just for a little background, I think part of the reason council came to that decision is knowing with the bridge being gone, We're talking with ODOT about having proper signage, but it's just the degradation of the roads that we cannot afford to keep up. So I acknowledge what you're saying. You just gave us information I was not aware of, but at the time we made the decision based on the information we had and in good faith that we were preserving the roads.
The other part of preserving the roads comes to, this is a different topic, but if you see ODOT, they were out on Nursery this last summer, filling in every little crack and part. The one thing, because I used to work in construction before I drove truck. If water gets under the asphalt, you're done. So a perfect example is like Goucher Street that you live on, David. All of those potholes that are starting to form, they've been there since I was a little kid. They just started out at about the size of a baseball or smaller. And over years and no maintenance, no nothing from Public Works because of funding or whatever the reason is. I know it's funding, but for when there was funding and stuff didn't get done for whatever reason. That's the reason the streets are in the way they are. And frankly, putting a 10-ton weight limit on it, if you're put a 10-ton weight limit on a street, you still do nothing to it, it's still going to degrade over time. So you can weight restrict every street in town, and until the funds are found, however they're found, and Public Works actually gets out there and does the work, even if that's just putting in a bag of cold patch every day, every dry day that there is, which we tried to have happen when I was on council down on Main Street, until that intersection was fixed. But until actually the work is done, weight restrictions really do very little.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anything else you'd like to
Yeah,
address?
there's another thing.
Go ahead.
Law enforcement services in this county. It is for it's a problem. It's a problem that costs a lot of money. And right now, I believe the sheriff's office costs me as a taxpayer here $336,000 and some change. And that number might not be quite right, but that's what I remember. That's a lot of money to get very little service. A perfect example is my sister-in-law had an event this morning where somebody actively was trying to break into her house. And frankly, a 20-minute response time for a sheriff's deputy is unacceptable.
For a home invasion, I agree.
For an active in progress home invasion. And I can tell you what I have told all of my family members from this point on is to lie to 911. Tell them that they have a gun or a weapon or something like that and you fear for your life so that they will come code 3 response from 20 minutes away wherever they are. Because in situations like that, seconds count. We pay a lot of tax dollars to that agency. And frankly, since they took over and the quote unquote honeymoon period where they did really stellar for the first 6 to 9 months, now I see what all of the other little communities that have their coverage complain about is happening right here in live action in our community. And I realize us having our own police department at that time of the day, based on the old coverage that we would have had, probably wouldn't have an officer on duty either. But had we built on what we already had, there very well could have been the possibility that we would have had a nighttime officer on duty and would have been there within minutes. So instead of this person out loose in our community, not to mention the sheriff's office had no desire to do any fingerprinting or anything like that to find the person. Because the person was actively witnessed touching a windowsill, touching the hood of a vehicle, touching a garbage can. All items which I'm no fingerprint expert, but I've watched TV, are all perfect places to lift prints. Most likely, odds are is the person's probably in the system, maybe not. But to have the officer straight up say, oh, that, we're not gonna do that. And take a brief description down and leave. What's our $336,000 a year? A 20-minute response time? Because if we're paying for a 20-minute response time, I want my $336,000 back. Let's funnel that into fixing streets instead of providing it for law enforcement coverage. And we'll get the 20-minute response time. My guess is he probably came from McMinnville. And we'll get it anyways, because every one of us pay taxes to the county to provide that coverage, even if Amity doesn't pay for it. So if we're gonna get the same level of service that we would with our regular tax dollars, why are we giving them any more? If they're not gonna provide a better level of service.
Isn't our contract up for renewal? Or did
In July. And for council's awareness, so this is the third, customer service. That's what I think of when they ask about fingerprints and the sheriff said, no, we're not gonna do that. That to me is customer service here, you know. This is the third issue of such of being dismissed during a crime that I've heard of over the last month. I'm not aware if it was our deputies here this morning or not, but I just didn't feel right.
And that was my sister-in-law's event. Something that's happened to me personally with the sheriff's office is, you two both live on my street in the same block, you know, we have a lovely drummer guy who loves to drum at all hours of the night. So on, I believe it was last Thursday, I think it was last Thursday night, I called a non-emergency number to report him at about 8 o'clock playing his drums. 20 minutes later, a deputy drove by, never stopped, drove by and turned down Barney Alley. I was standing in my living room window. I could hear him drumming. The minute that deputy got halfway down Barney Alley, I picked up and dialed the number again and said, did your deputy make contact? Well, I don't know. So she looked up the case notes real quick. He said there was no noise. Well, that's funny when you pause long enough at the stop sign to make a legal Oregon stop and turn down the alley, you're not really listening. Had he waited 15 more seconds, he would have been able to hear that noise complaint that I had called. Subsequently, the officer did come back around, and I proceeded to watch him stand and bang on his door for 10 minutes. Nobody ever answered the door. As far as I know, he never made contact with anybody, from what I can see. That goes back to, what are we paying for?
We're at 15 minutes for citizen comments. I just want to thank you for coming and sharing those concerns with us this evening. There's some things that we'll look into and there's some things that will need further discussion.
definitely, thank you.
Yep.
And I'll say it again, that's what it takes is people coming and presenting it to us so we can hear from citizens how they're perceiving and how they're seeing things. All right, what else do you have, Mike?
Well, on a related topic to the citizens' comments, I was going to update everyone on the graffiti incidents. What's that?
There's more.
Well, it's kind of an interesting story, but I can, if you want me to go through the quick version.
Yeah, quick rundown
please.
and then where we're at. Because what I have is any decision that needs to be made right now. And then any decisions that we need to think about between now and the next fiscal year, and then a plan ahead for July forward, kind of is like where I'd like to get in this conversation.
Yeah.
But the story is kind of the now.
Yeah, it is.
So the individual who's been graffitiing the Northwest Self-Storage Facility was arrested over the weekend by our deputies, thanks to a community member tip. The individual was told our deputies basically that he's an artist. He will continue to graffiti that building, and he is, based off of his criminal history, he's not concerned by either the fines or the threat of punishment or the arresting thereof. And as of yesterday, when I brought this up to the mayor, he had basically informed our deputies that he will continue to tag that building as much as he wants, because that's his canvas and that's how he paints. And then he actually called the Northwest Self-Storage manager and told him the same thing. He actually has then gone out, and he was, this was Saturday, Sunday. He was then arrested again for graffiti at the same time. And it's not just a spray can. He actually has an industrial strength spray painter machine, air compressor, et cetera. So he's pretty committed. It brought up a question from which is where we're going with this, since we were going to discuss graffiti tonight anyways, and options to fix it and ideas to go forward. The Northwest Self-Storage individual called me and said, hey, I've talked to my bosses, I've talked to my leadership. They are willing to give this guy a 20 by 20 foot square on our building and have it be his canvas and let him go wild on it. And so we don't have to repaint it, and we'll just let him have it and to do his art. And if he's like, is the city willing to agree to that? I broached it to Mayor King and said, here's kind of, this is the thought. Our initial thought is this might be a way out of it, but when I brought it up to fellow city managers, every one of them basically said, don't do this. This is a slippery slope. It's a bad idea. You'll soon get everybody in town wanting to have their 20-foot canvas so they can do their mural. So that was the comments from yesterday. As of today, two other thoughts came up, and then we got some feedback. The feedback was this gentleman was, since he has a long rap sheet, was finally incarcerated for either probation violation or parole violation. So he is currently incarcerated, but according to Deputy Summers, he doesn't know for how long, or what the judge will do with him, or if he will get bail, or if he will have to be released for COVID. So although he, as of today, he's in jail, tomorrow he may be out again. And since Northwest Self-Storage has just repainted it, we've given him a new clean canvas again. So it could be a couple days, it could be not. There's also an indication now that this could be a crew of people, of which he's one of them. So there may be other people doing the same work, which is why they all look the same and have the same initials. So there are, I hate to say it on public record, but I'm going to. We have put cameras out there right now to see if he comes back, to see if somebody else comes back, and we'll look into it. But that's where we are with this individual. Two other options were, instead of making an individual agreement with this one guy, where we say this one guy can have this 20-meter square area or whatever, we could say this becomes our mural art, urban art institute wall. Anybody can have at it. Anybody can paint on it, this little square, and they can run with it. But if they go just an inch outside that thing, then the property owner gets cited and we enforce our code. But if they stay in this grid, we won't even bother them anymore. I know some business owners around here don't like the idea of graffiti at all. They may not be amenable to this idea, but none of them have been tagged as much as the Northwest Self-Storage guy who's getting hit pretty routinely. The other option that's out there was to basically have the city of Amity buy 2 giant concrete jersey barriers, or build a concrete wall, put it in the park, and say this is our urban art wall, and have anybody come in and paint it, and let them have at it. They can paint it, graffiti, whatever they want. But if it gets obscene or there's gang symbols, we reserve the right to paint over it at any time. But then we just have it in the park, and that's our urban thing. And that would be this guy's option to go paint if he so chooses. But if he touches any of the buildings, we still enforce a code. That was another option that was presented today. So when I mentioned, hey, putting on trail cameras, security cameras, some of the other options we mentioned, this guy basically said, told the vandal basically told the property owner that he'd wave to the cameras basically if he gets caught, and he doesn't really care. But Deputy Summers did mention to me today, if they keep arresting him now that they know who he is, and if they can get him on camera, if we do put cameras out there, if they can see him, they continually arrest him at some point in the aggregate, it may get to a point where the judge may say, you're just violating your parole, you're done. Or every time he gets arrested and fined, he may just realize it's not worth the target to come down here, and he'll move on to another city. That's also kind of the comments of some of my fellow city managers, is to just keep hammering at him. But if we do that, then how are we enforcing our code upon this one business owner who keeps getting hit time and time again at cost? So I think that's the shortest version of the story. I'll turn it over to you.
So my first thought was Northwest Storage being a private business. If the city has a mural permit or a sign permit that they wanted to do, who are we as the city to say you cannot have this sign? Because Mike said we do have
The sign permit, but questionable would cover that.
It's not really a sign.
Right, but what if another business wanted to paint a mural? They would come to the city and we would approve or not, right? How would that work? If any private business owner said, I want to take this wall of my business that I own and paint a mural, a non-offensive urban art.
Do they even have to come to us for that? It's not a sign.
They would need to come to us, especially if they're on Trade Street, because it's an ODOT highway, so any big murals on ODOT highway would need an ODOT permit. But for us, we've kind of said if you come and do that, it would be some sort of permit or
I'm just
approval.
wondering, where do we draw the line? If corporate headquarters has told Dan, we're gonna allow this on our building,
Right.
but we have enforcement for graffiti. And the business says to us, that's no longer graffiti, that's our mural wall.
I think it's up to the,
I think it's
whoever owns the
business.
building
Yeah,
gets to make that call,
I agree. I don't think it's something we
whether
can
we like it
enforce.
or not.
We did have a comment from the audience member.
You're worried about enforcement, that wall borders railroad property. Has anybody thought about calling the Portland Western Railroad?
We did bring that up today.
Every time the person would park their car in between the railroad tracks, that's trespassing. And the sheriff's office wouldn't handle that because the railroad's federal. That's the FBI.
So right now, the individual walks, there's no indication that she, the one individual they arrested, there's no indication that he drives to the site. If he's walking up and down the railroad tracks, they would have to prove that he's trespassing. And then additionally, the deputies told me today that there's, the property owner says that they have an agreement with to have an easement of about 3 feet from the wall into the, 3 feet out from the wall, and they have that easement that's set with the railroad, so they've already done it. But we did consider the idea of the person, if we can see the person walking down the railroad tracks, that we could then cite the person or arrest them for trespassing on private property for using the railroad tracks. I did potentially even going to a federal level. That is something the deputies and I discussed today. But if he walks down the street and then just hugs the wall and then paints the building, theoretically, he may not be trespassing.
I just really am curious where the city's place in this is if the business wanted to go ahead, because we do ask that they paint over graffiti. And that is our ordinance.
And the wall that they are having tagged is the one facing the trucks.
That's correct, yes.
So in
Facing
reality,
east.
right,
Well, they also, just to be clear, they also own the section down by, so there is a section that faces west over by Dollar General, but it's predominantly this one over here by 4th Street.
right. So that section is not facing Tree Street.
That's correct.
So technically, if we're talking about murals, that would not be a section that would be under city review.
Well,
Well,
but we still have to call out graffiti, and Mike sends letters to people every time graffiti shows up.
additionally, there's the fact that the northwest self-storage abuts 153, which is an ODOT highway. So I have no idea where ODOT would say that that's within their driver field of vision.
Gotcha.
So my thought would be if we allow them to do this and we give them the highway, or we give them that building, we push it as far over to Fourth Street as possible, so.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, though,
People are complaining there.
I know the business owners on both sides, the Amity Truck and Tractor and the little green building thingy there. They're not really keen on graffiti. I'm sure they would see urban art and a wall panel as still being graffiti, so. It's a good option, and I don't know if it's, I just think if we give, it's an option to pursue, so.
It's one of those things that I would want parameters in writing between all parties. So every detail was, you can do this, you can't do this, and I don't see the city place to do that and make one exception. I just don't know of a good answer. This is a better answer than what we have, but I don't see it as a good.
That was one of the reasons why, and it was Chrissy, I give her credit for this, Chrissy's reason why the city could just go out and buy two giant, and I've seen these things before when I've deployed in locations, they're about that tall, but they're like 2 feet thick concrete jersey barriers, and you buy 2 or 3 of those, link them together, just set them in the park, and you make that your urban art graffiti wall. It's on city property, it's hard to deal with, you can push it over by the buildings over there, so it's not by the highway. It can be our gig, and we can tell the property owners, hey, if you get in contact, because this guy obviously is in contact with the business owners, like you tell them, please paint that wall if you need to do your art. Don't hit my building, because if they don't, they can go spray paint that, but if they spray paint the building, it's still graffiti. That was another option.
I just don't think that solves our problem because we have to buy the wall, monitor it all the time, pay for paint to paint over anything that isn't suitable.
Now we have an isolated park.
And then they can still hit the buildings.
They could, yes.
I think we would be better off focusing on a way to help the business owners cover and stick with enforcement. Mike and I did talk about this yesterday, and I told him I thought about it. I talked to my husband about it. I woke up with a bad dream from it, and I don't think there's a good answer. It's all gonna cost money. It's all gonna take enforcement or maybe an exception.
Yeah, I think regardless, they're gonna tag along the railroad. That's where they like to do it. They do that in every city, everywhere. I don't think moving, giving them a different place, they'll probably maybe do that, but still tag along the railroad. That's a thing.
And so in this individual's case, he did state to the deputies that he justifies it in his own mind in the sense that he's not tagging private property per se, in the sense that he doesn't go after somebody's house, somebody's car, somebody's, private residence or personal property. The fact that that is technically private property because it's a privately owned business, he didn't see the logic in it. He sees that as his art canvas. So I kind of agree with you in the sense that he's going to continue to hit that building regardless. So, and because in his mind, that's where he wants to go.
I'm not comfortable working around it because he thinks it's his art. I mean, it's against an ordinance, it's against the law, and we need enforcement. That's how I feel about it.
So I do appreciate that this business owner has been in communication, is trying to problem solve, is bringing the city into it to ask for help and for, so if we're not comfortable okaying this plan that they've asked of us to approve of, do we have any action we can take now to help this situation or help this particular business owner that has been repeatedly? I mean, how many of those letters have you sent out to cover graffiti in the last year?
Not counting the most recent one, at least 3, maybe 4.
For 2022?
From January of 2021-ish, when we started seeing these till the present, I think I hit 4, but I've only given out one other one to Earth and Wood, which was a different scenario altogether, so.
Is that what these business owners specifically want, is to just designate a frame? Do we have that in writing?
No,
Well,
and
that's it. It's all been just a conversation and he got okay from his corporate headquarters, but we just haven't seen that in writing.
so
Yeah.
his comment to me on the phone was that if the council, the mayor and council and I are agreeable to it, we can work out an agreement that they would come up with and basically do that. I told him that that Mayor King and I were interested in the idea, but we wouldn't commit to anything. And then when I spoke to Deputy Summers again about it, he said you would have to put a whole bunch of caveats in there and restrictions and qualifiers, and you get to a point where the business may say it's not worth it, but he kind of agreed with Mayor King and myself in the sense that they're bringing it to us and they're willing to do it and they're willing to accept it. Kind of changes the game a little bit, because I had the same thought. I mean, we're not telling him he has to do this. It's not the city imposing this on him. We're allowing him to do something that he's brought up himself.
Yeah, I like the conversation, I just would like to see more in writing and exactly what their plans are, like I said, all the little nitty gritty stuff. But,
Well, because I was just initially, I was like, yes, and answered the problem. I was felt more positive about it until I had time to think about it more. So I think moving forward, if you could tell him we're tentatively interested, but unless we had something in writing that we could then discuss,
All right.
we're not gonna allow or be okay with them taking that action until there's further.
And I would still encourage at this point enforcement. I really hate to just give this guy a get out of jail free card at this moment and just say, hey, we're not going to enforce anything anymore. We want you to just tag this.
yeah,
No,
kind of it sounds like he's almost enabling himself.
Until the time that it's decided otherwise and something is signed, we need to stick with enforcement just as we have. Like you said, the deputies are aware, they know of the person, we have cameras, let's just keep at it. And then if at a later time it's hammered out that the business would like to go with this other alternative.
Okay, I can do that. I will reach out to him tomorrow and kind of ping him and see what what he and his company are willing to come up with. We'll go from there.
Okay, and then I'm available if you want me to speak with him, or he can talk to council too.
Okay.
If we need to hammer out those details of what they have in mind versus what we would actually do.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they, come to a meeting.
Additionally, it also brings up it just says, for the furthering of the
Yeah.
discussion, we had brought up I brought up the options in the previous meeting of setting aside budget money for helping to buy or purchase paint, offset damages and losses. This art wall may be one of those things we do, or we can call it an art wall. Deputy Summers said basically you just let everyone know in the city that this corner of the building is yours to do whatever you want with. And let anyone paint on it, and if they get upset about each other painting over their own work, that's their issue. But that's another option, but I just want to bring up, there's always some of the other business owners did bring up ideas of, they like the idea of us helping with cameras, and in-person cameras. Some of the other options brought up there, and also one community member did ask me, and I brought this up to Mayor King yesterday, the idea of assisting with other damage of light to include broken windows, et cetera, throughout the city, if you'd be willing to help that for downtown business owners as well. So I only mentioned it because we were gonna talk about all those options today, and we kind of just focused on this art wall. So I don't know if we want to keep going down that path or call it good for the night and move on.
I think we should table the graffiti issue until we have more details.
And until we have our full council, I'd really like to have the full council for all these discussions.
Definitely.
I feel better about it.
So quickly though, moving forward, as we think of the next fiscal year, because mine is in the budget process right now. Are we in agreement that there should be some funds of some measure to go towards graffiti?
just get worse.
I mean, because there's lots of options, there's buying the paint, there's reimbursement, there's cameras, but we are going to need to know ahead of time before planning to put that in.
And I wouldn't even necessarily label it graffiti if we're talking about those other damage type issues as well.
Graffiti
Maybe if it's
slash
just business, whatever we want to call it,
Urban light removal.
whatever, however you want to word it.
Well, downtown improvement
Downtown
also,
improvement is what I was
because-
thinking.
That has connotations of downtown improvement group and some other, I mean, we can work it, I
it
get your
has
point.
connotations. of
Downtown
for tourism
assistance.
purposes, we need
Downtown,
to
yeah.
have our downtown looking good.
Downtown assistance,
Okay.
downtown.
Well, we can figure out a way to
assistance, Whatever,
call it, and
I
then
don't know.
once we have the money too, then if we put the money in there and you approve it, the money's there, we can use it for however we want.
I was just thinking ahead as you're trying to get all of the lines going. But yeah, so graffiti can be an ongoing conversation. Definitely.
The only other issue I have, ma'am, is for everyone's awareness, we finished the audit. We sent the letter to them electronically early this morning and officially in the mail yesterday. So they'll have it wrapped up and presented to us hopefully by the end of the week or early next week. And then we'll get it to the state on time, and then hopefully either they or Kathy Taylor will present the results of the audit, the official audit to council on the 2nd. So,
March.
yeah, March 2nd. So the audit, for all intents and purposes, is complete. And that's all I had for tonight. So I know that took a long time. My apologies.
Do any counselors have items of business to bring to the work session this evening? What?
No.
Okay, Mike, I'm gonna need your help with this one as well. So something I wanted to work on is the speed sign and the speed sign placement. So we got the grant to cover half the funds of the speed sign. The one that we were looking at, the unit itself was about $5,000, so we got 2,500 towards that. Come to find out that in an email, some of the poles that these units need to be mounted on are up to $10,000. So we still had the ODOT guy come out. Gary and I met with them. We did a walk. He showed us the locations, the approximate locations where they could be. And then he said, but you could get a speed trailer like the sheriffs have. The prior knowledge I had that wasn't an option for us on ODOT highways, but he said, there's blanket coverage in the state of Oregon. Anyone can have these on the right of way. So we're like, right on, start pricing those and knowing that we have to talk to First Federal and the grantors. And then Weldon from ODOT came back and said, I opened a can of worms. Apparently there might not be blanket approval. People just do this, but I can't find it in writing that these speed trailers are okay or that we are able to have them on our right of ways. So I'm like, I don't want to go out for a purchase that is not going to be okay. In the walk around town that we did, there were a lot of specifications. It has to be after the second 25-mile-an-hour sign, not before the first or within 100 yards of the first. It has to be a certain distance from crosswalks. Pretty much it would be between 2nd Street and Maddox. Here, if you're talking about coming that direction. And so in all 4, it would be about the same. The south side, it wouldn't work because they're not allowed in school zones.
That seems counterintuitive. You think you really want?
Well, it actually has to do with the amount of crosswalks they have there. There would be no place within the school zone that's far enough from crosswalks because they're a distraction from drivers looking at the crosswalks.
Okay, I was gonna say, what's wrong with the crosswalk? Because you'd also want to monitor speed near crosswalk.
Right.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
The other aspect of this, though, that he let us know is because our speed is 25 miles an hour, we would actually have approval for a smaller size of sign. So it was 12 to 14-inch display instead of 17-inch. And So with that, you can use a less expensive pole. It's the Belspar, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Poles, like we have our stop signs on, the only difference is they have to be 7 feet for the height clearance because you have a 25-mile-an-hour sign and then you can post your speed sign, your center speed sign underneath. So that's where we're at with the speed sign. And I think that given the unknowing of the speed trailer, we would be best to look into specific pricing for the smaller sign.
And they would go on the same pole as our speed signs? No.
No,
Not that, well, unless he told me something different. Initially, he told me no.
So not the speed signs that are already there. We would have to purchase a pole.
I see.
We would have to purchase the 25-mile-an-hour sign that is proportionate to our 12 to 14.
I see, so we'd have to get a different sign.
Yeah. So it would be our own speed sign.
I see.
But because we haven't done more than initial digging into that, I think the price of the smaller units, the cheaper pole, and the sign would be similar to what the 17-inch one would be on, and we would need the 10,000 pole. I guess what I'm asking, and I plan to ask Mike, is if we can get the ODOT guy back out here to get approval of specific sites, and then get those posted.
I love it.
And then give Mike approval to reach back out to the vendors with the new specifications of what we need to get and move forward with at least the one sign somewhere between Second Street and Maddox, which actually works out for federal wait for half of it, and it will be. While ODOT's here, we can also get them to approve alternate places, so if we get more funds and can afford more signs.
Yeah, it'd be nice to get it already pre-approved this week.
Yeah, and they said they can do them all on one permit at
Sweet.
one time.
And, you know, maybe we can look at that little slippery slope of that later.
Well, so we're still waiting to hear different. I just don't want to.
I know that kind of hurts, but if we could get one,
It would be really nice to have the trailer one.
So the trailer one would be authorized for use on our surface streets that we own, so we could theoretically put one in front of the schools, we could put one in front of City Hall here, we could put one over by the
Drag it all over the
right,
place.
Fourth and Fifth, but we would never be allowed, we would never be allowed anywhere near Trade Street and Nursery, which is where our highest flow of traffic is.
Right.
But
They're also about 6,000 to 8,000.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to make sure that council was okay with moving forward with at least the single sign.
yes.
okay.
So Mike, can you get back in touch with Weldon and ask him to come back out?
Yep.
And then we can get the written approval. And the pricing on,
Pricing for a
did
12 to
he send
14.
you examples of the smaller ones?
I can check. I don't know off the top of my head if he did. I know he's told me there are a bunch of specifications on what they should look like, their size, their color, what blinky stuff they can display. I don't know.
I just
Okay,
haven't
good
even
picture.
looked at the price difference between the 17 and the 12, but at this point, yes.
And you know, the sad thing is, you only used to have a radar trailer. It was provided all on donations.
I heard that. I don't know what happened to it, but I knew we had it at one point.
I just can't open the can of worms that when I asked about going that route and he said, yeah, I said, can I see it written somewhere that we're allowed to do this because I've heard otherwise? And that was the can of worms that he said, now my management can't confirm one way or another. I'll keep you posted.
But you could do.
Yeah, so that might be something for the future. And then The last, or actually, I have two more things. Is RTI coming to the March meeting?
I can confirm with them, I thought they were. I'll
Okay.
check.
They were gonna come and briefly present the survey results. They're also, I don't know if they will at the meeting or to me personally or with Mike, but they sent the proposal for services for the next 3 years. And I'm not comfortable making a commitment to them before the budget. So at this point, I want to tell them, we will not know until after July. And Mike, what is your input on that? They talked to us about the Ford Family Foundation grant.
Yes,
Which would make it about $3,000, but that's only for year one.
And that's not a guarantee.
no, it's not. I could. When we initially reached out to them and did this back in like 2019, shortly after I got here, the idea would be that they'd come out, they would do the surveys and kind of give us a plan for how we could do, continue economic development and growth through this process. When we got waylaid by COVID, I kind of changed the parameters after a bunch of delay of just saying, how could we keep our businesses going post-COVID and not retrograde backwards and lose businesses and stuff. And then that kind of morphed into this survey that presented, and because they said it was going to cost a lot more money, because they were running out of their grant funding, I kind of kept bringing it down to basically, well, let's just get a survey, see what the people think, and then we could potentially present it to council, what you saw during goal setting, we can incorporate that into the goal setting and go forward from there. And I kind of left it open as to what we would do afterwards. So when I broached it to you, I was kind of looking for your guidance as to whether you wanted to go forward with this or not. Since this also started under Mayor Cape at the time, I was kind of moving forward without any real guidance. So now that, this is kind of concluded and I have a new mayor, I kind of want to know if you still want to do this. So I'm deferring to you, really, all of you to.
I
this is
think
your
the
plan.
services are valuable and I would love to be able to utilize that to work on those goals like we talked about at goal setting. I don't know if it's financially doable. And if it's a 3-year commitment, then it's gonna be a no. If it's that 1-year commitment where we can work with them for the grant, I think that that's something we can decide as a city between now and July. But I just know them coming to the March meeting, I don't want to leave them hanging, thinking they have customers, because I would love to be able to say, yes, we want you to come, we want you to do this. I don't know if it's wise financially for us to make them do it.
Yeah, I agree. If we can do a 1 year with a, possible 2-year add-on or whatever.
Well, because the proposal they sent was like, this is the first year with the possible grant, but then this is what we would do in year 2 and 3, and it's like the big push is in year 2 and 3.
The grant money is not guaranteed, so if we commit, we don't get the grant money, we're on the hook to pay them, so it's.
Right. I think we would have to build into budget the entire amount.
If I may, the issue with the budget at this point is considering all the other little add-ons we have in here. I've already explained this to Mayor King, all the cities I've talked to and all the budget planners I've been in contact with are expecting at least every cost to go up by at least 5% for inflation. We may have the Amity County Transit in there. We're going to set aside potentially money for the graffiti. We have potential matches for grants that we've applied for that they have to be in there. So this would be one more item to come out of the general fund. And we don't expect revenues to go up by much. So we're going to be really tight going into the next year. So personally, on the financial side, as the budget officer, I would tell you that putting money to RDI is probably one of your lowest priorities. It may need to go, if it's something we have to cut right away, it has to be something we cut.
The only other thing is with the ARPA funds, economic recovery. So we could have a conversation about whether or not that could be used. But I'm just saying it's not for not wanting to have that or thinking that it would be beneficial. It's just, I don't.
This conversation.
And so, when we talk with them at the meeting, if they can start up, they would. And then the last thing was the points of contact assignment. So this is something that will officially be done at the March meeting. We have everyone except for Flossie here. My hope was just to read them out and see if there's any objections that you guys want to discuss. Is everyone fine with that? So for April, I have you as the finance chair. And, let's see. MacArthur. City Services Chair. And Infrastructure. Councilor Boyd Press. I have you as the Community and Business Engagement Chair. And the Parks Co-Chair. Councilor Dunlap, I have you as the Parks Chair. And the Community and Business Engagement Co-Chair. And that has, Councilor Saucier would be the co-chair of finance and the chair of.
Council Billings.
Infrastructure chair and city services co-chair.
No, he's my bad boy.
Yes. Any objections? Yeah, community and business engagement. Okay, so yeah, after everyone's sworn in, we'll have that as an agenda item for meeting, and that is all I have for tonight. Anybody else? Anybody else?
I have nothing to add.
I have nothing to add. Okay. Anyone in the audience, anything to add? We'll adjourn the February 16th work session of the Amity City Council. Thank you.